Good morning. Thank you for joining our webinar. I'm Felipe Munoz. Thanks for joining us in this one of the series of webinars we'll have this year, showing you what we have, what we find, sharing with you the information we gather through with our researchers all over the world. Today, we are going to talk about the global battery electric vehicle market, what happened last year, details of demand by markets, the trends we identified, and what is supposed to happen or what we expect to happen in 2022. I'm joined by my colleague Jani Eriksson. He's the senior consultant for Jato in Europe. He's based in Sweden, and he's been more than 20 years in the automotive industry, supporting our clients with analysis and reporting. He'll join us later in the presentation, and so let's start. Let's start with this presentation. So, what are what's the content we're gonna talk about today? So, basically, the presentation, considering the time, it's gonna be about two main things. What happened in 2021 in only 10 slides. It's a very small, short. I like to keep it simple and easy. In which we are gonna show you the global totals in 2021 compared also, of course, to the previous 2 years. What has been the trend also over these years. We'll have some details of the sales by regions and countries. So, of course, we'll be talking about China, Europe, with some focus about Norway, which is the market where you can find more FTEs compared to the overall market. USA, of course, and then we'll have some more information about the sales by OEMs, divided in two groups: those Western OEMs, or they consider, European, Japanese, Koreans, and Americans, and a second group composed by the Chinese, which are already outselling their Western peers. Then we'll have the top market share winners, who were the OEMs that grew the most during these years. And finally, we'll have some details about what consumers are really buying when they get an electric car. Finally, we'll have some perspectives for 2022, our view of what's going to happen this year regarding the drivers of growth and what's going to happen in the developed world and in the third or developing countries. So let's start. One consideration we have is we need to start with the considerations. Some notes. First, we need to start with including specifying what the presentation includes. So we're just gonna talk about BEVs, so BEVs, or battery electric vehicles, which are the only pure electric cars. In this case, we'll focus on passenger cars. So we exclude the light commercial vehicles, the electric ones that are available in Europe and in some other markets. And we also exclude the plug-in hybrid fuel cell cars. So it's also important to note that Jato is present in 53 markets. So all of the information include all of these markets, which make up 85% of total global volumes, but is around 95% of BEV volumes. So basically, we are covering most of the world, and we are also making estimations or some research for other markets that we currently do not cover. like Africa, Latin America, Pacific, or Central Asia. So what happened last year? So last year, the global total 4.2 million units, which is a record for the global industry, considering the challenging time we had in 2020 regarding the lockdowns and the shortage, the semiconductor shortage. This is 108% more than the 2 million units that we saw in 2019, sorry, and almost 200% more than what we saw in 2019. So this is around 6% of all vehicles sales, passenger car sales in the world. So once again, it's also a record in terms of market share. And we're talking about the market of the size of the Germany and the UK together. So or Japan, including the light commercial vehicles. So this is and Japan is actually the third largest car market in the world. So we are talking of something big now. We're talking of something that, even though it's still under the 10% share, global market share, is going very fast and is also reshaping the industry from many points of view. Then we have the global annual sales, the trend over the last 10 years. So what has happened in the last 10 years? I mean, 2020, 2012, we barely saw an electric car in the street. Some of the pioneers of the first massive electric vehicles we got by then were the Renault Zoe, Nissan Leaf, or BMW i3. The trend continued quite growing, but at a very modest rate, until Tesla launched the Model 3, as we all know, in 2017. Plus, then the Model Y in 2020, and then lately the trend has been accelerated by the Volkswagen group of plaintiffs, and finally by the leading cars in China, which are almost broke the growth over the last 20 months. So you can see here the steady growth. We started the annual growth has been from then we have the information by okay, then we have the acceleration, the details by region. So we have also, as you might know, most of the demand is happening in China. China accounted for 55% of the global demand last year, followed by Europe, Turkey with 29%, and the US and Canada with 12%. So you can see big gap between these three. Even if they are, that's where most of the sales are happening. There are big differences between them. China has its own way, Europe has its own way, and USA and Canada, it's fine in its own way. I mean, China has focused most of its growth on cars for the masses. Europe is mostly focused on premium or high or more expensive cars, while USA seems that is heading to creating a new segment with the electric trucks and big SUVs. The rest of the world is mostly South Korea and Japan. You can see that the rest of the regions, they barely have a presence in the electric vehicle market for now. But this, as I'll tell you later in the presentation, is due to change in the coming years. So you can see the difference here between the importance of these three markets within the BEV market compared to their weight in all the vehicle markets. So, for example, China, it's 55% of electric vehicle market, but it's 31% of all vehicle sales. Europe, instead of this, Europe makes not 29% of the electric vehicles market, but is only 18% of global demand, while the US is the opposite. No, so we still see big differences here, and you can see. I mean, the case of China is still very important. Actually, however, the EVs are more popular in terms of market share in countries like Norway, we will see later, Netherlands, Sweden, or Iceland, and they are still very rare to see in countries like Canada, Italy, Spain, Japan, or South Korea. So now let's have a detail for Norway in numbers. So I'll give you my Jani. Can you go ahead, please?
Yes, sure. Just to give you a glimpse on one of the markets where the electric vehicle share is highest in the world. So last year, Norway had a lot of records broken. So for example, they did an all-time high ever in car sales, and the record from '86 was broken by around 9,000 units. We can also see that the xEV share, so here we're actually also including plug-in hybrids. So if you look at plug-in hybrids compared with pure electric vehicles, we can see that the share is over 86%, which is also an all-time high. And astonishing also is that the EVs, now pure EVs, zero emission vehicles, actually increased 2021 by almost 50% compared to 2020. And this also means that the sort of symbolically important target of over 50% of EVs sold in 1 year was broken, since the share was 64.5% in 2021. All of this resulted also in the average CO2 dropping heavily. So it was reduced by 17 grams from 44 to 27 grams as average in the Norwegian market, which is quite astonishing. So just looking at the top 10 list of most sold models in Norway, well, it's no surprise considering the previous numbers shown here that a lot of these vehicles in the top 10 list are pure electric vehicles. So 8 out of 10 are pure electric. Toyota RAV4 and XC40 obviously have other powertrains as well. And we can also see that 7 of these 10 models in this list are SUVs. So we can see where the focus lies in Norway. So how does it come that we see this development in Norway, and why are we at this high level currently? One of the reasons is the consistent and stable EV politics. So there's been a consistency for at least 1 decade, but even more now in the EV politics. And we can see that Norway is one market in Europe where the EVs are actually cheaper than internal combustion engine vehicles. And this is due to exemption from registration tax, but also VAT. And EVs have also had its share of subsidies and privileges, like no road tolls, being able to drive in bus lanes with certain conditions and things like that. We can also see, we saw a great market response, especially around 28, 29, 2010, where the politics were there, but there were not really products available. But we could see models such as Nissan Leaf coming into the market that Felipe showed you previously. BMW i3 also had its impact in the development in the very early beginning. We can also see that the charging infrastructure obviously is of great importance. There's currently around 17,000 stations available in Norway where you can publicly charge your vehicle, and about 3,300 fast chargers, which is of course impacting the user friendliness of EVs. The third part and last part I'd like to talk about is the population. That the Norwegian population obviously have learned to live with EVs. Studies show that 80 kilometers of driving range is enough for practically 10 months of the year, or 300 days a year, more or less. And that's something that the Norwegians have learned. But the current generation of EVs also is of great support, because they do provide all the practical aspects that the customers are looking for. SUVs, four-wheel driven, there's also trailer hitch possibilities and things like that. And then the number one reason for people buying EVs, which is probably not a surprise, is the economy. So it is not only the total cost of ownership, but also the lower retail price of EVs is very important. Second most important reason is the environmental friendliness of those. So that's back to you now, Felipe.
Thank you, Jani. Actually, Norway is the best example, where EVs can be adopted by the whole population. However, we must consider that the demographics, culture, and many other aspects are different from country to country. So yeah, but still you see progress in some other regions. China, for example, it's, as I said before, is the largest market for these cars. In 2021, there were 2.3 million, which counts for almost 11% of all market. No, and that's definitely more than the 910,000 that we saw in 2020, or the 716,000 we saw 2 years before. It's important to notice also that most of these 2.3 million electric cars sold in China last year are made in China. 99% of those cars are made locally, which tells a lot of the dimension, not only in terms of volume of demand, but also in terms of production. China is making these cars for now, mostly for the local demand, but sooner or later, these cars are gonna arrive abroad. So last year, most of these sales were controlled by the joint venture made by SAIC, General Motors, and Wuling. 18% of those sales came from this joint venture. It was followed by Tesla, which is significant to see Tesla in the second position in such a big market, ahead of other Chinese makers like BYD, that has been also been working on electric vehicles for a long time. And you can see also the fourth and fifth position, which are Chinese, Great Wall Motors and GAC. Volkswagen is still lagging behind its rivals with only 5.4%. But considering its SUV offensive, this should change and should improve in the coming years. You can see that so the electric vehicles represented 3.3% in 2019, and then 4.5% in 2020, and it's also 11% last year. So 17% of all the sales of electric cars came from local OEMs, and local I mean Chinese origin. Then Europe is also an interesting case. Europe is also growing very fast. We are talking now of a market of 1.2 million units, which is more or less 10% of all passenger cars registrations. But unlike China, all the origin of these cars is mixed. 19% is coming from Germany, but you can see that the second position last year was China. So Chinese-made electric cars are already outselling those made in other European countries like France or Slovakia. You also see Korean and American cars here. So the origin here is a bit more diverse, no? Then as expected, the leader in the market is Volkswagen Group with 25% market share, which is more or less the same market share it has in the overall market, followed by Stellantis with 14% and closely followed by Tesla. So the leadership is more. It's taken by Volkswagen, but you can see that the second position is extremely competitive. As it happened in China, you can see the market share jumping from 2.3% in 2019 up to 10% last year. So it's quite big. And here, the local OEMs, the local the car groups who are from Europe control 63% of the market. Then finally, in the USA and Canada, we also have a big growth, especially 21 compared to 2020. But it's still that the market share is very low compared to Europe and China. We're talking only of 3%. However, in 2019, it was 1.4%. So it's already doubling. Tesla, of course, as a local player, is leading with 68% of sales. I mean, the Model 3 and especially Model Y, are doing very well in the States and in Canada. And you can see that 80% of those cars are made in the US. So we have basically more or less like the situation in China. Most of the local demand is coming from locally made cars. Then what do we have? What's the detail we have for the global sales by OEM? So here we gathered the information for the main Western groups, including American, Europeans, Japanese, and Koreans. And you can see that Tesla, of course, is leading with more than 900,000 units. But with an important presence in China and USA, and actually Chinese demand is almost as the same as in the one in the US, no? While in Europe, Volkswagen leads with an important presence in China too. However, Volkswagen is quite far behind Tesla in terms of volume. The third largest group is Hyundai Kia, thanks to its important presence in Europe. And it's, of course, at home in South Korea, which is the other big market after these three. Stellantis is making progress mostly because of Europe, with still very low presence in China, or almost no presence in China and the US. And Renault Group, which was one of the pioneers some years ago, is now at the 5th position. Then we have also the rest of the European and Asian groups. The detail for so these groups accounted for 56% of global electric vehicles demand. Chinese groups are very big, and we as expected there are many, no? So these are the 10 most important ones. We are, as I told you, the joint venture from the SAIC, General Motors and Wuling, is selling very well, especially the new Wuling Hongguang Mini, which was the best selling electric vehicle in China last year, followed by BYD, Great Wall, and GAC. So all of these car makers, they barely sell these cars abroad. So most of the production remains in China. Only 5% of the volume sold by the Chinese makers is happening outside China. So who won? Who won over the last 2 years? Of course, first of all, the joint venture. Its global share jumped from 3.3% to 10% last year. It was followed by Volkswagen Group, which is also growing very fast, Stellantis, Xpeng, and Ford. These were the 5 biggest winners in terms of market share. And which means that there are also brands or groups that are losing share because there is more competition. Tesla's market share fell from 25% in 2019 to 21% in 2021, which doesn't mean that it's not selling more cars, but there is more competition, and so it's expected to see this drop. What are people buying? So here we have an interesting information regarding the importance of SUV in the electric vehicle market. Until 2020, you barely saw an electric SUV, but as it happens in the rest of the markets and the rest of with gasoline and diesel cars, most of the demand wants SUV. People all over the world want to drive SUVs, so it should be also the case in the electric vehicle market. 37% of the electric vehicle passenger cars last year were SUVs. It was followed by sedans, city cars, and hatchbacks. Actually, the SUVs, although they lead the market, they are still behind their market share in the overall market. I mean, when I say overall market, I include all fuel types. So last year, we're talking about 42% of all global car sales were SUVs, which is ahead of the 37 we still see in the electric vehicles. So we still see room for growth for these kind of vehicles. So what to expect in 2022? So there are 2 trends actually that we expect to see this year. So first of all, in the developed markets, we see more presence of Tesla thanks to the Model Y. The Model Y started, it has already done a good job in the US and Canada, but it just started its deliveries in Europe and China. So this car is also due to shake those markets in 2022. So we expect more sales from Tesla, which is going to have in the long term an impact on the traditional premium makers in the developed world. So though the success of these Teslas is due to impact the sales of gasoline and diesel sedans from the German premiums, for instance, or SUVs. But we also see an interesting trend in Europe that is gonna reinforce in 2022. That is spring or cheap or low-cost electric vehicles. We still see that there are no real competitive electric cars in terms of price, and the spring, considering its recent launch and its results so far, is showing that when you have a more competitive price, there is demand also in markets like Europe, right, for instance. No, and in the US, we expect the electric trucks to start not shaking the market yet, because this is a big thing that is going to take longer, but it's a big step. And these cars are going to show whether this bet on big electric trucks is going to work or not. While in the developing markets, the situation is a bit more different. We expect that the Chinese brands, will continue gaining share and actually dominating this market, the BEV market in these regions, thanks to brands like MG, Chery, BYD, Great Wall, or even VinFast in the Southeast Asia. So we already see a big presence, or not big presence, but important presence of brands like MG in South America, India, or Southeast Asia. Chery is already in the top 10 in Brazil. So these brands are due to shape those markets and also take sales away from the traditional makers in those regions, because we still don't see competitive electric vehicles coming from the European, American, or Japanese brands for those markets. I hope you like the presentation. Thank you for attending. I'm taking questions in case you have some. Happy to take, considering the time. It's good to be here, and in case we don't answer your questions now, we'll be happy to answer this week. Let's see if you have questions. Okay. Okay, I don't see. Okay, I don't see any. Will this slide shared? Yes, this slide will be shared with the participants. They will be posted online. What will be the EV presentation in India? Do you have any insight? India is still lagging behind, but some Indian makers like Tata are doing progress. The problem, as with India and many other developing markets, is infrastructure. So as long as there is not enough infrastructure, it's hard to tell the consumers to buy an electric car. So first, in my opinion, the first thing those countries need to do is to work on those on the infrastructure, and then simultaneously, of course, work on more competitive cars for those consumers. No, but India is supposed to be a player and a key player in the long term. Any perspectives on the impact of the war on battery electric vehicle sales? Well, the usual impact. We already started to see that some European plants are shutting down or are stopping production because of the lack of some components that are coming from Ukraine. But generally speaking, the ex-Soviet republics, or Russia and all of these countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, do not count for a big part of the global car sales. In 2021, they made up to around 2.5% of the global car sales took place there. Most of their production is locally sold. They barely export cars to other regions, and the imports from other regions are also very marginal, because many of the Western car makers have factories in Russia. So we expect for now, if the situation continues as it is, we expect not big impact on demand or global demand. Okay, I think we are. What's your view on the progress in the oil factories? So, what is your BEV market projection for 2022? Well, as we said, I think the market should be around 7 or 7.5 million units. So it's around a bit more than 10% in 2022. I mean, if you look at the numbers for January, for example, the global demand for electric vehicles increased by 80% compared to January 2021, when the market was already solving some the lockdown issues 1 year ago. So the demand is still growing very fast. We see more models, more brands, and more countries and governments willing to make the shift. So this year we should be around 7 and 7.5 million units.
I guess also just adding briefly to that is also that you know, a lot of governments have stated that they will be sort of CO2 neutral or sell only zero emission vehicles at a certain year, and obviously the support from government is also impacting together with all the new models and actors in the market. So the trend is definitely going to show further increase in the EV sector.
Jani, I have one, actually, the final question for you. If it's around incentives, the question is, if the incentives for BEVs were taken away, how would the EV market shape now that it has reached a decent penetration? How important are the incentives?
I think still they are very important, and that's also probably one of the learnings we can draw from the Norwegian case, because those have been stable over a long period of time, which also makes it one of those key incentives for people to actually buy EVs. And also, as we've seen in previous publications from us, we can still see that internal combustion engines are a lot less expensive than EVs in many markets and regions. And I think the subsidies are still required to sort of help this transition until we get to a level where people are actually adopting them at an even higher share that we see today.
Yeah. So, okay. So I think we are done for today. The remaining questions we'll try to get back to you during the week. Thank you for attending and for joining us, and hope you participate again in the coming webinars. Thank you very much, Jani, also for your presence here and your views from that important market as Scandinavia.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.